Thank you for tuning in to another Thatcher Report podcast. I've been meaning to get to this for a little while. Um, between parenting and shoveling snow and cooking a lot more than I normally ever in my life, I got a little delayed. So I want to tell you about an evening event I hosted under this Thatcher Report banner. And I've hosted political salons in the past. My good friend Jesse Wegman spoke at many of them in 2016, which was just such a bewildering time with the surprise win of Trump presidency. And I've done a few other ones, but now I'm kind of consolidating things under Thatcher Report. And I hosted a really interesting thinker, Adam Louis-Klein, who spoke in my home about 2 weeks ago. So he led a discussion, and his focus, he's a young academic. We'll get to that in a minute. His focus for now, I think he's going to have a long and amazing career, God willing. His focus is about anti-Zionism, right? You've heard Zionism became like a pop term after Hamas invaded Israel a little over 2 years ago. And it's become like a shorthand. It's become like a slur from the left, right? It's like the N-word or something. It's obviously very specific to Jewish people, but you can't say, oh, I hate Jews. You just say, I'm anti-Zionist. You can't say I'm anti-Jew. That's not cool if you're left wing, but you can be anti-racist, right? Self-congratulatory anti-racist activist. And then, of course, you should be anti-Zionist. So Adam Louis-Klein is, I think, a very brilliant man. I'm always going to say young man at this point. You're used to it. He's a brilliant young man. He's an anthropologist, and he now studies the phenomena of anti-Zionism, which now he's not super overtly political in his analysis, but I'm going to say it's all coming from the left. Everybody does this like false equivalency with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Those are two people. They're very potent podcasters and media entities, and they're troublesome. But the entire Democratic Party has essentially become anti-Zionist. Yes, there are a few exceptions. John Fetterman, Josh Greer, Rahm Emanuel, you can count them on one hand. But in general, anti-Zionism is a left-wing virtue signaling posture that's become enshrined over the past couple of years. So Adam Louis-Klein started, his initial critique was on academic anti-Zionism because he was in a he still is in a PhD program. And anti-Zionism already long before October 7th has become axiomatic at elite liberal institutions. Elite liberal academic institutions. This guy went to Yale, the University of Chicago, and McGill, and I think maybe even Oxford or something else in England. He's a super smart guy, like absolutely incandescent thinker. And one of the ways that I can tell is because he can summarize things so quickly and so accessibly, which I think is a true sign of intelligence. And he knows from elite academia. This is his what he's been doing since he's like 18 years old. Now, since purely focusing in academia, he's also widened his aperture, mostly again to the left. Although he does even just today, he had a podcast about a Substack post rather about Tucker Carlson, and he's really interested in the phenomenon of wanting to eradicate Israel. It's very unusual to have a global movement, or certainly a movement in America, but we're seeing this in Europe and South Africa and so on. It's very unusual to have a movement to want to eliminate a country. That's not very common. People have Iran is in the news right now. When I was younger, Iraq was in the news. Nobody talked about eliminating the country. Even in World War II with the Nazis, I don't know what all the debates were, but obviously we did not eliminate Germany. In fact, we had the Marshall Plan to rebuild Germany, and that was super incredibly successful. So it's his focus is this idea that it's okay. It's actually encouraged to want to eliminate a country. And the country, of course, is Israel. So anti-Zionism, that's what it is. It's eliminationist, which is a sort of a fancy way of saying kill them all. So, gosh, who else in recent world history, speaking of World War II, wanted to eradicate the people of Israel. Maybe there wasn't an Israel then, right? But there was the people of Israel. We've been around for millennia. That's funny. Odd how that works. So to go back, Zionism is a 19th century term. It's not a popular term. It's used sometimes in Jewish circles, in Israeli circles, but not a lot. It's really not a relevant term. It's sort of like talking about the 13 colonies and their bid for freedom from England. I mean, it's important. We refer to it. We have the 250th anniversary of this country coming up, but people don't really think of themselves as Minutemen and colonial freedom fighters anymore. So in any event, but the left wing likes to fixate on the term because it's a fig leaf in order to not say Jewish or even Israeli. Are these people Israeli phobes, Israelophobes? They love adding phobia as a suffix to insult people who disagree with them. So maybe they're Israelophobes. Zionism, the 19th century term for Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. So being against that means no more Jewish country. The problem that these people have thought of is that there are about 10 million people living there, and they would like to stay there the same way that I would like to stay where I am. And so, Jews are not super keen on this idea of attempting to be eradicated again. The fact that the global left, from seemingly centrist Democratic senators to very fiery TikTok progressive activists, all want the same thing, just makes me think of the old cliche, politics makes for strange bedfellows. So that basically sums up the entire 2-hour talk. We sat on little stools next to each other. I asked him questions to try to understand what he was saying, but it was 90% him. And then afterwards, the poor man was besieged by curious folks asking him a million questions, and he seemed to really love it. So that's his whole shtick. Anti-Zionism is just another hate movement designed to kill Jews or murder as many as possible. So the fact that nowadays about the majority of Jews live in Israel, right? Most of the Jews in the world are in Israel and in the United States of America. It's about 50-50, maybe it's slight advantage to Israel, or it's going to happen soon because they have better birth rates, not just the ultra-religious. Secular Jews in Israel also have higher birth rates than in most other Western countries. It's a culture that really is very pro-children. In any event, either half or the slight majority of Jews live in Israel, and most Jews around the world feel a kinship and don't want it to be eradicated. But to be anti-Zio, as one of their left-wing terms, their far left-wing term, Zio, it's again like the N-word. It's just this kind of evolution of hatred. They think it's just wrong. They shouldn't exist. They should just, and if the country doesn't exist, then what do you think will happen to all those people? Literally, Zohar Mamdani has said many, many times that he doesn't think Israel should be a Jewish country anymore. Okay, well, Israel is a Hebrew word. The whole point is that it's Jewish. So if it didn't become Jewish, meaning if there became an Arab majority because it's in a region with lots of Arab people, what do you think the Arab people would do to the Jewish people? Do you think they would be friends with them and invite them over for tea? Or do you think they would murder them in their sleep while they're at home? We've seen this story a lot of times, and Israel has a really powerful army, not for fun, because they have to. Otherwise, they're dead. So the logic is so apparent, but it's sort of forbidden on the left to question it. And this is something Adam Louis-Klein is doing. So it's very frustrating that cheery, happy, TikTok-friendly people like Zohar Mamdani share a similar pathology as Adolf Hitler, most American university faculty, and Tucker Carlson. It's really crazy that this is happening, but it is. Now, they come from different places, but they all wind up in the same place, which is that hating Jews is good for business. It gets you listens, it gets you votes, it gives you academic prestige. So that's Adam Louis-Klein's pitch, right? Anti-Zionism is, in fact, a hate movement, and that's how it should be considered. Now, from my past essays and podcasts, I like to focus my critique on the left because I've always lived in blue states. I have absolutely no choice in almost any election. It's only Democratic candidates. It's really just in the primaries. There's very little political competition in the world I live in and am from. So I focus my critique on that because I think they should do a better job or get out of the way, and which would I would prefer starting over. But I think so. I'm just going to summarize it really quickly, and then I'll get back to Adam Louis-Klein because I really focus my ire on the left, and he does too, but he's more subtle about it. Anybody would be more subtle about it than me, to be fair. But that's not really like the focus of his critique at the moment. I think it's going to evolve, but I think that the left wing, the Democratic Party, mainstream media, academia, the museum curators, the Hollywood creators, this is kind of the cultural academic media elite. I think, and the party, I think they took a weird turn sometime after the civil rights movement. Right, civil rights movement was like the zenith of the success of the left wing after the New Deal. They had the New Deal, which was great, and then they had a civil rights movement, which was great. But then something happened, right? If you think about it, Jimmy Carter was kind of like the last civil rights movement president, and he was terrible. It was a terrible time in the economy. It was a terrible time in Iran, speaking of Iran. And he was really ineffective. And, people mostly care about the economy. And he tried to change it, but it was too late, and he was voted out of office. Every Democrat president since then has essentially been a lightweight Republican, right? Bill Clinton is a new Democrat. It's new because it's not the old civil rights movement, New Deal era. It's essentially private enterprise neoliberalism, and Barack Obama was exactly the same. You can argue that Biden was a departure from that, which I think he was, and he was more classically left-wing from the civil rights mold, but updated for the 21st century. And you can see where that got him. Similar place as Jimmy Carter. The economy started doing terribly. People are most concerned about that. And he didn't really have a good answer for the cultural issues that people found alienating. So, one term president. And now we have Trump again, which is so funny. So in any event, the Democratic Party, the amalgam that creates the left, which is different than the amalgam that creates the right, I think they've kind of committed ideological suicide. I don't understand why they don't have new ideas. I think there's lots of good things out there that we should be focused on, like the economy and maybe the environment to a certain degree, and food and things like that. But Robert F. Kennedy was in the Democratic Party. He was essentially kicked out. And what does he care about? He might have some theories about vaccines that I don't support or don't understand, but he certainly has a good focus on not eating processed garbage. And that's being shoved down our throats by corporate America, and the federal government seems to support it. And he has a different take, and it's very refreshing. And I don't even know why that's political. Like, don't all people want to eat delicious, healthy food and not have diabetes and all types of autoimmune problems that most likely are highly linked to our terrible diets? In any event, I think there's lots of good things for Democrats to think about, but no, they don't. They still are they've kind of evolved or devolved from the civil rights movement, and now it's social justice. That's really the banner that they're under. I don't see other banners. They climate justice. There's like the word justice is really important. I think it was apt in the 1960s. I don't know that it makes any sense anymore in the 2020s. And I think that explains their lack of popularity. We hear a lot now in the mainstream media about how unpopular Trump is, and that's true. He is unpopular. And I think everybody knows why. He's unpopular because the economy isn't better. That's it. It's really simple. Yeah, there's aesthetic stuff, stylistic things. He's kind of bombastic. Some people love that. Some people find it alienating. He's obviously divisive. Some people like that. Some people find it alienating. But at the end of the day, people are scared. White collar, educated people that I'm around are scared of AI. And all Americans, unless you're quite wealthy, are struggling, and they don't think it's going to get any better, and it's not going to get better for their children. In any event, Trump is unpopular. You know who's more unpopular? Democrats. That's the thing the mainstream media doesn't seem to 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 end the sentence there, is that it's not like there's much political competition right now. So where are the two areas that Democrats, I think, have gone wrong? One of them is on the economic side, and one of them is on the cultural side. The most important thing is always economics. I think Democratic policies increase income inequality. They say they care about decreasing income inequality. Right now, affordability is a hashtag that'll come and go, like climate emergency and so forth. But really, in places where Democrats preside and have a stranglehold on power, like New York, California, Massachusetts, they restrict housing, and there's very little new infrastructure. But they do raise taxes and fees, right? And they have these very entrenched unions that work that get contracts from the municipalities and from the state. They charge exorbitant amounts of money, and they deliver very few services. So you can't really build anything. The schools are terrible, and it costs a lot to live in these places. And the framework, and what I really like about Zohar Mamdani, Bernie Sanders, AOC, is that they're very honest and transparent about their policies. I find centrist Democrats like Gavin Newsom, they seem to kind of speak out of both sides of their mouth at the same time, and it's sort of unclear where they stand, and it shifts around a lot. But the progressives are pretty clear, and I like that. I also like that about Trump. I think he always says what's on his mind. There's not a lot of a filter there. And for the progressives, they're very clear. They want to raise taxes, they want to add regulations, and create or build on bureaucracies. I'm just going to note that strategy, or those tactics rather, to fulfill the strategy of reducing income inequality haven't worked. They just haven't worked in this country. That's the economic side. The other side is the cultural side, which is, I grew up hearing about the victories, the hard fought victories of the civil rights movement, right? And it wasn't just about Black people, it was also for women. And then later in 2015, it was for gay people with marriage equality. And that was a time that I got to experience as somebody who was alive at the time. I didn't really experience segregation against Black people and that fight, or even anti-woman, rules. Women couldn't have credit cards. No, I grew up with, my mom was a completely empowered person, which is great. But what I really saw in my lifetime is gay people becoming mainstream via the mechanism of marriage equality. I'm sure it's much more complicated than that, but that's just to be reductive. That's what I saw as a straight person. I saw commonplace homophobia that I grew up with as a boy become obsolete, thankfully, and regrettable. And then gay people can get married and just become mainstreamed into American society. And one of the proofs of that is that in the Trump administration, there are a lot of gay men, at least as far as I know. I don't know about women, but there are gay men who are absolute leaders in the administration. And that's just sort of not really interesting to talk about. It's just kind of normal. And that's really tremendous. That effort certainly came from the left. The right fought that kicking and screaming until they eventually changed for the better. And that's all really good stuff. I still support all that stuff. I think it's great. What happens, though, is that those victories are now in the rear view mirror, thankfully. And the left kind of kept on going. And they kept on looking for justice movements to cling on to. And it kind of led them to become anti-Western. I really honestly believe that at the heart of the ideology, if there really is an ideology at the Democratic Party, is that they're anti-Western. Right? It's very common to hear critiques of capitalism. It deserves to be critiqued. I think it's better than most any other system I can think of, but the critiques are real. But it's sort of like, it's more than just trendy to decry anti-Westernism. It's kind of standard among the left to be anti-American and to just be like, well, it's all bad. It's stolen land. Like Billie Eilish at the Grammys talked about stolen land. And hilariously, the local California tribe, where her estate is, wrote her a letter saying, "Great, we agree. Give us back. How about you give us your gigantic mansion with all the land around, acreage of land around it? We'll just take it. We'll be happy to." And guess what? Billie Eilish did not give it back. But the point is that it's sort of like normal to be anti-Western, and with that comes ideas about gender, about ranking people based on skin color and supposed narratives of victimhood. Although last I checked, life is hard for everybody, and borders. Like, should we have borders? Should we not have borders? And it's all kind of weird, right? And most Americans reject that form of thinking. It's not popular to have open borders. It's not popular to say that a child can change their gender, and or even an adult. I mean, I'll even go there. It's like, I don't really get it. Mental illness, for sure, that's a real thing, and it manifests itself in very disturbing and confounding ways. But is that to be celebrated and enabled surgically or even socially? And then, of course, all the DEI stuff. It's sort of like, okay, sure, ranking people. Who decides? Can I decide for everybody? Then it's fine. But if somebody else decides for me, no thanks. So most people are smart. Most Americans are smart. They don't like this kind of cultural anti-Westernism of the left. And since they don't build anything, it's kind of easy just to say, let's try something else. So this is why Democratic states have stagnating infrastructure, insanely expensive housing, and concentrations of very rich people and large amounts of very poor people, but not a lot of people in the middle. It's very hard to afford blue state middle class lifestyle. So thank you for listening to me in my soapbox. Thank God I did not lead the talk at my house. It was Adam Louis-Klein who did it. So let's go back to him. So he also came from the far left, he's explained to us, and now has left it, but he didn't go into more of that, which I'm dying to follow up with him about in a next gathering we have. Anti-Zionism is a hate movement, he says. I'll note that it's a hate movement that targets Jews. It's not a courageous political stand by renegade freedom fighters at expensive colleges, Hollywood studios, or any place like that, or in Albany in the State House. It's just another hate movement in the very, very, very long history of anti-Jewish hate movements. And if you're a Jewish person listening to this podcast, you're going to nod and say, that's right, Purim is coming up, which is, guess what, a story about an anti-Jewish hate movement in ancient Persia. Today, we're talking about what's happening in the modern Persia, Iran, but this is an old, old story for us. Adam Louis-Klein says that in the medieval era, Europeans targeted Jews because of their beliefs. They weren't Christian. They didn't believe in Jesus as Messiah. So the medieval European said, okay, well, you can change that belief or you can die or be persecuted. Right. Then in the 19th century, going back to this era of Zionism, but in the 19th century, that's when modern day nation states rose up, right? Around like the 1860s or so. Also at the time when we're having our civil war in this country, it was a really wild century. A lot changed from the beginning, from 1800 to 1900. It was a very big century. Nation states rose up, right? So instead of having only kings and emperors and everybody is a subject, now you have democratically elected or dictatorially in control leaders, and you have citizens, right? This idea that there's a citizen with rights is a new concept of the 19th century. Europeans targeted Jews because they didn't want them to join their society as citizens. They targeted other people too, right? Gypsies and gay people and so forth. But Jews were and are a people, and a multi-ethnic peoplehood. And the Europeans, not just the Germans, it was a shared concept across Europe. I think many of them seem to continue to have this belief that Jews, there is just no way for Jews to exist in the new political order of nation states. So now it goes into the 20th century, but it's a debate started in the 19th century. And then there's a very tidy solution to this. Just eliminate the Jews. Problem solved. So in the current era, Europeans, and now there's America, and they have the liberal American counterparts. Once again, they're targeting Jews for their beliefs, right? It's not. That's why Zohar Mamdani and maybe AOC or other people hop up and down and say, "I'm not an anti-Semite," which is itself a very outdated and weird term that doesn't mean anything anymore. But they hop up and down and say, "I'm not an anti-Semite. I don't hate Jews because of their genetics, right? I just hate Jews because of what they believe." And what do they believe? They believe that Jews should have sovereignty, and they just already have sovereignty. It's not really up for debate anymore, but the Jews have sovereignty in a state the size of New Jersey. And why do they want this? They want this state of New Jersey, but in Israel, to celebrate their culture and be protected, right? According to the European and liberal American system, that's not tolerable. That's not acceptable. So the tidy solution here is just eliminate the Jewish state. Problem solved. Literally, Zohar Mamdani says this on a microphone. I don't think Israel should be Jewish. And then we've already talked about, well, what that would mean practically for the people living there. And then therefore, should we get rid of all the other groups? Like we should never have any more Native American reservations in this country? Because why should Navajos have any type of concept of sovereignty? Like, are we going to apply this rule to everybody? Maybe get rid of Korea. A lot of Korean people in Korea, that seems like an ethno state. Maybe we should get rid of them too. And so on and so forth. It's a nihilistic teleology that gets you into maybe a nuclear winter. I don't really know. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that's the current belief. It's going back to the medieval idea, and this is Adam Louis-Klein explains this so beautifully. It's going back to the medieval idea where, well, we don't really care about genetics. It's just kind of what you believe. So right now in New York City, what you see is that some Jews are okay. Those are the ones who hate Israel or really want it to go away. And some Jews do believe that. They're a small minority, but they're vocal. They're tokens. And but those Jews are okay. But the Jews who don't agree with us, they're not okay. And they need to be eliminated and harassed, eliminated. This is why comedians have their shows canceled at venues because of quote unquote security reasons. This is why Israeli sporting events have to be either canceled or the fans are corralled in little pens. The Jewish people are kind of, again, for security reasons. It's also why when there's a Jewish Israeli basketball player in the NBA, Spike Lee, a spokesperson, essentially a cultural leader of the left, wears pro-Palestinian garb because he's clearly saying, I don't think Israel should exist, because the pro-Palestine movement is not in favor of Palestinians. It's calling for the elimination of Israel. If they were in favor of Palestinians, they would maybe focus on getting rid of Hamas and building civil institutions and all that stuff. But that's kind of boring. It's much more fun to just say pro-Palestine, free Palestine, and really what you mean is kill the Jews, because that's what happens with Palestinian nationalism for the past 100 years. So why are we here? Why? So the medieval stuff, okay, that was crazy, black, whatever, that the Dark Ages, that was a long time ago. And that's like weird, spooky monks and stuff like that. And then Nazis, okay, that's crazy. That was, thank God we got over that. That was a very dark period. And we triumphed over similar thinking in this country with the civil rights movement. So that's long ago. So why is the left doing this now? Why are they so fixated on Israel, right? Like, again, Iran, Venezuela, China, Uruguay, I don't know, just name a random country, Slovenia, none of these countries, Iceland, none of these countries get much attention correctly. They really shouldn't in certain regards. But Israel. Most of the UN resolutions passed against the country is all about Israel. The left wing is obsessed with it. And Adam Louis-Klein has a long explanation. I'm not going to go into it, but it's essentially, if you look at the fall of the Soviet Union, many millions of Jews were trapped inside the Soviet Union. They were trapped because they were not allowed to leave, and they were persecuted for being Jewish as a different people. And they had Jew in their passport as a nationality. It's really only in America that Americans on both sides of the aisle have tried to eliminate the sense of Jewish peoplehood and tell us that we're a religion or a faith. Even Josh Shapiro talks about the Jewish faith and the Jewish religion, which is really not terms that we use for ourselves at all. It's terms that Christians use for themselves, which is great for them. They should decide for themselves. That's not how Jewish people talk. But in any event, I won't go into it here, but the anti-Zionist formula came from the Soviet Union, went down into Arab countries, and then was transmitted to places like Columbia University from Arab scholars like Edward Said and many others. So there's this funny combination. On the one hand, in the Middle East, which you still see today, and this is why I critique the naivete or the hatred of the idea of saying free Palestine. It's like free to do what? How are they going to be? Nobody ever seems to ask that question. It's about Arab supremacy, right? So Adolf Hitler had Aryan supremacy, this weird idea that the German people were Aryans, that they had this kind of ethnic purity or something. And now there's this is the debate that still happens in the Middle East, and it's part of what's happening in Iran, but it's a different ethnic interest group. They themselves are the true Aryans. That's what Iran means. But in the Arab world, it's Arab supremacy. The only people who can wield political power in the Arab world are Arab Muslims. Now, guess what? It's not as simple as that. There are Jews, you've heard of this, Kurds, Berbers, Christians, Yazidis. There's other kind of offshoots of Shia Islam like Alawites and Druze. There's all types of different groups in the Middle East. Not all of them are Arab. Not all of them are Muslim. None of them are allowed to have sovereignty. The only one that does is Israel, but it fought really hard for it. The Kurds are still fighting for it. And Christianity is basically non-existent anymore in the Arab world. It used to be everywhere, obviously. It started there. And then, but Islam is, the current manifestation of political Islam is intolerant to it. So it's a funny thing. Arab supremacy, which is sort of not questioned ever in the left, like the New York Times never questions that, or Harvard University never questions that. That idea dovetailed, I think, around the 1990s, maybe earlier, with the sort of chic anti-Westernism of mostly wealthy white people in this country, like kids wearing Che Guevara t-shirts and stuff like that from, if you remember that, from the 90s. And it was kind of cool to be like, yeah, man, I don't like the West. I don't like capitalism. America now, Billie Eilish, America's on stolen land, right? Well, funny, she's speaking in English in Los Angeles. Not the indigenous language of Los Angeles, but I don't see her taking language lessons of whatever the name of that specific Native American group is that wrote her the letter. I can't remember their name, starts with a T. But so we had the Arab supremacy movement, which is alive and well, unfortunately, dovetailed with essentially rich white people, the people who go to college, elite colleges. And the rich white people, this is my favorite part, they leverage their alliance with generally rich black and brown people like Zohran Mamdani and a lot of the leaders of the BLM movement, or AOC, who didn't start out rich, but she comes from a pretty good family and has obviously done very well for herself. And the rich white people leverage the rich brown and black people to justify their anti-Jewish bigotry, right? They used the black and brown groups as levers to say, well, we're not the only ones who are critiquing Israel and Jewish sovereignty. Now, why any of these people care about Israel, I couldn't tell you, right? Adam Louis-Klein would say, I can tell you, it's because they're infected by a mass hysteria hate movement, which has now become just normal. It's just normal discourse at Princeton University with their latest course offerings. Just walk down the street. Just say the word Israel out loud with a bunch of non-Jewish people around and see what happens. I find this, as you can imagine, very, very frustrating because I like Israel and I don't care. I don't understand why. I just it's not intellectual, right? Hate movements are not intellectual. They're not rational, but my rational mind struggles with it. So Adam Louis-Klein, like the last speaker I heard, Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib, before him, they both have really simple mandates. I think this is part of the popularity of these young men, I'll say it again, is because they're very, very clear. Ahmed al-Khatib, he wants to free Gaza from Hamas. Israel, from the river to the sea, those are not really his issues. He wants to free Gaza from Hamas, right? So he's not walking around saying free, free Palestine like blankly. He has an actual plan to free them from a murderous regime, right? Adam Louis-Klein, he simply wants people to understand that trying to destroy a country is hateful. Seems obvious, but not if you talk to left-wing people who twist themselves into knots about the cause du jour. Today it's ICE. Yesterday was trans. The day before that, it was the climate emergency. Tomorrow, maybe it'll be affordability until they forget about it, and then they focus on something else. I don't know what it'll be. Left-handed people, something. So Adam Louis-Klein, I think, would say, even Jews deserve to live in freedom, right? I've talked about the Navajos and the Koreans and so forth. Even Jews get to do that. And I'll just add that criticizing, and to live in freedom requires sovereignty. Criticizing the messiness inherent in sovereignty is fine. All countries do dumb, terrible things all the time. And that should always be criticized, right? That's the idea of a free press, which they have in Israel. And it's great to criticize that as long as you're doing that equally everywhere, right? If you just single out one place and hold it to a standard that you don't hold to other places, well, then that's a problem. What's even more problematic is criticizing the specific sovereignty of one group is truly hateful, right? Again, if you hate Israel, then you have to hate Navajo land reclamation efforts or whatever you want to call it. I'm not up to date on Navajo sovereignty litigation, but I'm sure it's being litigated. And if you got to hate it all equally. Otherwise, guess what? You're anti-Jewish, and you're not supposed to be. You're racist if you're on the left or even on the right. That was the whole point of the victory of the civil rights movement, is that racism, no bueno. So what Adam Louis-Klein says is that anti-Zionists, who have long ago taken over elite academia, I believe they have the ear of most of the Democratic Party, not all of it, but most of it, and certainly the mainstream media, is they base their anti-Zionism on 3 libels, which is a fancy way of saying lies. I literally had to look up what is a libel. I'm not a lawyer. I don't use that term very often. They're lies. So there are 3 lies that anti-Zionists use to justify their hatred, right? Hitler justified his hatred based on race movement phrenology nonsense. That was the same thing that was happening in America against Black people, like studying their skulls and saying, oh, it's like real nonsense, quote unquote, science. The nonsense on the anti-Zionism is based on the 3 lies. The 3 pieces of nonsense are that there's a genocide, that there's apartheid, and that Jews are white settler colonialists. Those are the 3 big lies. I'm going to go through the first one, genocide, because that's really the main lie, and then briefly touch on this last 2. So again, I call out Zohran Mamdani because he's very clear, and he's a lot in the press. And I live in New York. I look at the New York Times every day. It's sort of unavoidable. It's in my DNA to a certain degree. They love Zohran Mamdani. He gets a lot of flattering coverage. He gets a lot of coverage, period. He's having a honeymoon moment on the left. That moment might last his entire life. I don't know. The guy's like 34 years old. So I fixate on him just because I think he's a good avatar for the progressive movement, but AOC and others, they now refer to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. That's their term. When I say now, it's because in October of 2025 of last year, there was a ceasefire, but somehow Israel is still trying to kill all Gazans. That would be the genocide, right? You got to kill them all. That's what makes it a genocide. I don't know how, anyways. So, and you can see evidence of this ongoing genocide libel, even in coverage that on NPR, I heard it the other day. They talked about how 600 Palestinians have been killed since the October 2025 ceasefire by the IDF. No, they don't say why or what happened. They just noted that that happened. It's as if Hamas doesn't even exist anymore. Now, I don't know the numbers by heart from after October 2025, but I'll tell you the fighting hasn't stopped. Why hasn't the fighting stopped? Because Hamas still has a tunnel infrastructure and they're still attacking the Israelis, who control a little bit more than half of the territory, and Hamas is the other half. So, but NPR doesn't cover that, right? They only cover the Palestinian victimhood part because it feeds into this lie of an ongoing genocide. And in the Munich Security Conference the other week, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez also mentioned the ongoing genocide, right? The problem is that it's not true. Now, it depends what you mean by the term Palestinian. It's a long conversation. It used to be that Arabs living within the borders of Israel as Arab citizens were called Israeli Arabs. Identity is always in flux in the world, particularly for Palestinians, which was as a term was not used popularly until 1964. So whatever these people want to call themselves, I think you should let people call themselves whatever they want to call themselves and respect that. So Israeli Arabs or Israeli Palestinians, or just they say Palestinians because like they kind of don't want to think Israel exists or whatever. They have democratic full civil rights in Israel. They're in every level of Israeli society, political parties, Supreme Court justices, sports stars, all that kind of stuff. So there is no genocide within the borders of Israel against whatever you want to call the Israeli Arabs, who are like 20% of the population. That's not happening. There's poverty. I go in my essay about all the poverty issues and discrimination, but that's not genocide. And guess what? Every country on earth has poverty and discrimination, usually following ethnic lines. It's terrible. I don't know of any politician on any side of the aisle who's had a good solution to improve this. I don't see affirmative action in DEI meaningfully reducing Black poverty in New York City. I think it perhaps entrenches Black poverty. That's a different conversation. But there is certainly poverty in Israel, and it's allocated to a high degree among Israeli Arabs. And it's a really long conversation about why. At the end of the day, it's unfair. It's just not fair. I hate to see it. I wouldn't want to live like that, but that's not genocide, nor is it apartheid. So let's look at Gaza then. They talk about the ongoing genocide, and maybe they mean Gaza specifically. I don't know. They're kind of loose with their terminology. There are 2.1 million people today in Gaza. So is Israel just like bad at genocide? Israel has a really powerful military. They could kill 2 million people, God forbid, but they could if they wanted to. So are they like just incapable of that? So you're saying Israel can wipe out the air defenses of Iran. They can wipe out or just significantly attack Hezbollah, the Houthis, on and on and on and on, but they can't do it against the Gaza. I don't know. I don't understand the evidence of a genocide. Okay, hold on. Didn't like 100 million Gazans get killed by the IDF during the war? Hasn't the whole thing just been a giant war crime and ethnic cleansing? Isn't that really what the Israelis did? And then maybe they stopped, or maybe they didn't stop because it's ongoing. It's very unclear what the progressive argument is. So I'm going to go into it. Obviously, it wasn't 100 million people. There aren't 100 million Palestinians or Jews. But let's talk about what happened, and is it a genocide? So what happened is that generally, it's now agreed. It's very unusual. The IDF recently published a report saying that they essentially agree with the Hamas total number of deaths from the Gaza war. I don't know if that includes natural deaths or not, because obviously people die all the time. People are born all the time. But 70,000 is the number that Hamas, which is always euphemized as the Gaza Health Ministry, which every single Western news outlet talks about the Gaza Health Ministry as if it's separate from Hamas. It can't be naive. It can't just be out of ignorance, right? That's got to be willful disinformation from the media. Like, why would they call it the Hamas health ministry? It's 100% Hamas. It's not like a bunch of guys in white jackets, white robes, like studying numbers or something, like in a laboratory. In any event, the number, it's amazing, but now there's agreement, 70,000. So there's the disagreement is what share of that are combatants and what share of that are innocent civilians. And let me just say, this whole thing is horrific. It's horrible talking about large numbers of dead people. I freaking hate it. And guess what? None of those people would be dead if Gaza didn't attack Israel on October 7th, 2023. Just think about that. With this whole genocide talk, it's like they would just be alive if none of like they started it, right? And then a lot died in a defensive war from Israel, and it's horrible. And I wish it never happened. And it's all self-inflicted, if you will. Al-Khatib would say it's not so simple as that. Hamas rules with an iron fist, so that's true too. It's a tragic situation. Israel says about 30,000 dead are men, so that leaves 40,000 men, women, children, and kids, and stuff like that. Hamas, who knows what their numbers are? Their books are super cooked. Weird that I prefer the Israeli quote because Israel is a democracy with a free press, right? Hamas, no. Weirdly, that distinguishes me from every single news media outlet in America and every single academic faculty who just repeat the Hamas numbers because they have a bone to grind with the Jews. I don't have any other explanation for that. The reality is that it's terrible anybody died, but it's probably a 1 to 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 death ratio, meaning for every combatant, for every civilian killed, for every combatant killed, maybe 1.5 at most civilians were killed. Terrible, but way lower than most other conflicts. And guess what? That's not a genocide because it's a hot war, right? They didn't have death camps. They didn't have any of this kind of stuff that you would think of as genocide. Millions of people, thank God, were not killed. Hundreds of thousands of people were not killed. Maybe 40,000 innocent civilians were killed. Terrible. Hamas made the entire territory a military base, right? They built the largest terror infrastructure the world has ever seen, the tunnels. Israel still doesn't understand how big the tunnel network is, and it's in their best interest to figure it out. They built military facilities and mosques and schools and hospitals. The entire enclave of the Gaza Strip was a military base. It's terrible. It's unfair for unaffiliated Palestinians who are just trying to go about their day and live their lives and love their children. It's awful. It's awful. It's not a genocide. It's collateral damage in a terrible war that should have never happened. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, right, sort of a slightly different calendar, 4 years, but not super different from the war in Israel. Also both wars started during the Biden administration. 2 million people have been killed. 2 million, right? We're talking 70,000 in Gaza. 2 million are dead in Ukraine. Now, most of those are soldiers. They don't deserve to die. They're just young men being forced into military service. It's awful. But at the same time, civilians are getting killed too, right? According to what I've read, nobody really has a number. It's tens of thousands. Okay. Nobody is using the word genocide against the Russian army, right? But Democrats are very comfortable, and Ezra Klein and people in the mainstream media and very prominent thinkers, probably Spike Lee too, they feel very comfortable alleging that Israel has committed genocide. Adam Louis-Klein says that's not fair. That's wrong. That's a lie. It's just a lie. Why are they lying? Because they want to attack the existence of Israel. This is the foundational creed of modern day anti-Zionism, right? You can't have an Israel. It has to go away. So that is their lever that they use. It's super, super disturbing. The second and third lies, Israel is an apartheid state. Israel is white settler colonialism. I'm not going to go into that here. I'll let you read the Substack. One of my friends pointed out after I published the essay that the apartheid argument is mostly about the West Bank, although sometimes liberal, more progressive, whatever you want to call left-wing people these days, think it's for all of Israel, or they think it's just for the West Bank or something. All I'll go on to say is that apartheid is a term is an Afrikaans term. It's specific to South Africa. It is just not the right term to talk about the suzerainty of Palestinians in the West Bank, right? Obviously, it's not a good situation for the Palestinians, the left bank and the West Bank, to be caught between the Palestinian Authority on the one side, Hamas on the other, and Israel on the other side. It's a tough situation. The situation exists because Israel was attacked in 1967, or they were about to be attacked, and Israel won the land from Jordan. So should those people be Jordanian? Should they be their own country, which they do not seem capable of doing, or perhaps they don't even want to have their own country? It's a different conversation, meaning their own country alongside Israel. Or should there be some other idea of sovereignty? It's a really sticky situation. It's not apartheid. If it was apartheid, why were the Oslo Accords signed? And why is there a Palestinian Authority? It's just not an accurate representation of what's happening. Puerto Ricans cannot vote for Congress, Senate, or the presidency. West Bank residents, Palestinian West Bank residents, can't vote in the Knesset. Do we have apartheid in Puerto Rico? No, of course not. That's ridiculous. The term apartheid, popularized by Jimmy Carter and people like in the 90s, it's really just like a slander, a libel. It's just designed to be provocative, to use an example of an obviously bad system in South Africa and just apply it, which has a colonial roots, right, in South Africa, and just to apply it to Israel just as a slur. It's not designed to solve any problems. It's only designed to try to like retroactively revoke the state of Israel, which, by the way, the Israelis are not going to go with. And the white settler colonial allegation or libel, the lie, is just absurd. You go to Israel, half the people, American liberals love color. Skin color is very important to them. Identity politics, they call it, or ranking people. DEI is pretty much entirely based on skin color for the most part. Half the people, so if you're very color coded, if that's how you like to think about people, like your sock drawer or something, half the people in Israel are brown, right? The other half are white. And then there's a small minority, like 2% are black, the Ethiopian Jews, which is a growing population because of birth rate, but it's always most likely gonna stay small. Maybe it gets to 8% or something. So Israelis are half white, half brown, and there's a growing group of black skin color people, if you want to think about skin color. So how are those people white? I don't understand that. It's completely different than in America, which has more of a white majority. And the whole settler colonialist system, settler colonialist libel, ignores the fact that Jews come from Israel originally. And they've always been there. And there was an effort to build a state, which I've talked about at great length in other places. But to say that it's settler colonialism like the Dutch in South Africa, or the British perhaps, or the Spanish in the Western Hemisphere, it's just not, it's like saying apartheid. It's just using a term from one location, applying it to another location, not sincerely, but just to be provocative and to just sort of make this crazy argument that Israel shouldn't exist. And Jews are the indigenous people that are still alive. There were other people that the Jews killed to create sovereignty, right? They didn't take over Canaan with a love letter. They took it over by force, maybe around 1500 BC. But those people are gone. to history, like the Romans are gone and so forth. Jews are the indigenous people, which is the favorite term on the left. And as the left tells us, all indigenous people are superior, noble victims who demand their stolen land back by any means necessary. Just ask Billie Eilish. So, so the whole anti-Zionism hate movement is based on three lies. The big lie is genocide. Now, I think there's a more vexing question. Adam Louis-Klein alluded to it a little bit. But what should Americans do who agree with his conclusion that anti-Zionism is a growing hate movement supported essentially by one of our main political parties, and it's now affecting more fringy elements of the other political party? What should we do about it? That's something I want to tackle in future Thatcher Reports. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.